HBO and Investigation Discovery have delivered a new true crime documentary, Lost Women of Alaska, that works to highlight not only the case of one particular serial killer, but also how law enforcement often fails Indigenous women. As Native women vanish in Alaska, police must look to the past and a warning that went unheeded to discover the truth about a serial killer. As the net tightens, questions only grow about how many women this killer could have silenced. This is from executive producer Octavia Spencer, who also narrates this, and she's done a few other series surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous women, including Lost Women of Highway 20 and Feds. Now, this newest 3-episode docuseries showcases a murder mystery where the suspect enjoyed bragging about his torture and kills to his friends and even a lover. So it's discouraging and maddening that it took so long for him to actually be arrested and charged. We get several first-hand interviews with people directly involved in the case, one of whom unknowingly stole video and photographic proof from the suspect. Brian Stephen Smith is the suspect here, and at one point his lover even reports very disturbing conversations and actions related to Smith. But because of a lack of physical evidence at that point, there was nothing the cops could do. Now I appreciate that the interviews here, they're not fluff. They spend the time to focus on the facts and actions rather than trying to string this out and make it more sensational than it already is. The lead detective walks us through many of the steps taken throughout the investigation, providing glimpses into his mindsets and allowing us to see aspects of his personality that other docs don't always include. For instance, at one point, a former officer criticized the Anchorage PD for using this term called NHI, or no humans involved, referring to people that they deemed unworthy, like the homeless, drug addicts, even sex workers. When the lead detective hears about this, we can see the offense that he takes. I'm not convinced there aren't officers who openly feel this way, and maybe even the lead detective is one of them just trying to save face. But it's fresh to see some raw emotions come from law enforcement rather than constant stoic and emotionless droning about facts. Now, the case spends a decent amount of time delivering background on the two missing women, Veronica Abuchuk and Kathleen Jo Henry. Friends and family were the ones to really push for investigations and searches because they were Indigenous women and weren't receiving the priority that any missing person should receive, regardless of race or sex. The series efficiently outlines how these two victims experienced abuse, addiction, and all sorts of hardships that then led to them being homeless and vulnerable, making them targets for a heinous killer. There's a lot of injustice that's shown throughout this series. Obviously, much of that just comes from the lack of effort or immediacy to find the women, but then how an unknown third victim wasn't even included in the indictment against Smith. And this dude, he's going to make you want to retch because of just the smug expressions that he displays throughout interrogations and even the court trial. There's also another individual who was a friend of Smith, and it doesn't sit right with how the lack of consequences were present for this guy. He had at least some knowledge of Smith's actions, and we get to see the text exchanges between the two, which are at the very least odd, if not incriminating. But then, during a police interview, he feigns ignorance and is basically let off. The documentary isn't meant to search for a killer, but rather to bring awareness to the missing and murdered Indigenous women of Alaska and throughout North America. Seeing the devastation and the sorrow that friends and family members experience, it should hit a nerve with audiences and possibly even spur actions that enact changes in the law and investigative procedures. I think from the perspective of awareness raising, the series accomplishes its goal. We get heart-wrenching accounts, are shown the tragic actions of a killer, and then get to understand some of the bias that's deeply ingrained in law enforcement. While this features some very horrific accounts, at least we get to see the outcome of the killer and his sentencing, so that is a little bit satisfying. I'm thankful also not only for the audience, but also for the family members of the victims who may come across news stories. The videos and photos that were found on Smith's phone were heavily obscured here, showing us blurry and nondescript imagery, but still maintaining the audio clarity of the recording so we can clearly hear the killer detailing out his crimes. Now, one aspect of this case that's brought up within the series is that at one point Smith leaves Alaska and travels to Washington, D.C., and he visits an area known for its rampant prostitution, or as many of us call it, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the United States government. But all kidding aside, Smith's stay in D.C. it's very short, and then he returns to Alaska. But we don't learn why he took the trip. Was he meeting with a fellow killer? Did he just go for a spur-of-the-moment weekend getaway? For an individual who's deadly and twisted, it seems like there could be a lot more to this trip. But because it's never addressed, it just sits and niggles at my brain. This is an important awareness-raising account, highlighting the ongoing tragedies facing the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women, but it's also an extremely sad and somber story, showcasing not only the murdered victims, but the ripple effect their murders created on loved ones and the communities around it. The interview accounts are raw and touching, allowing subjects to fully emote, whether that be intense grief or righteous rage. With efficient pacing and visceral details, the storytelling will captivate you, but you'll also probably want to put something much lighter on after because of the weightiness of this content. There's no sex or nudity, there is some profanity, and while the imagery is obscured, the descriptions of photos, video, and audio showcase an extreme amount of disturbing violence. Now, as a reminder, I don't give couch ratings to documentaries, but this is one that's certainly worth a watch. And the more understanding and the awareness that exists, hopefully then the less Indigenous women will be targets of violence. Okay, what are you binging right now? Anything excellent that you could recommend? I would love to hear your suggestions in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.